In the vast expanse of the open sea, where every wave could swallow a ship whole, pirates didn't just survive. They made even the mightiest royal warships tremble. But what gave these lawless men the power to turn the ocean into their own playground? The answer was not in the cannons, but in schemes so cunning they could change the course of the entire game. If you think you already understand the true power of pirates, think again. The next stories will unveil secrets even darker and bolder than this. Subscribe and ring the bell, so when the black sails appear on the horizon, you'll be the first to hear the wind whisper their name. What gave a ragged band of sea rogues the power to make the king's proudest warships hesitate? Was it the roar of their cannons, or something far more subtle? In the shadowy chess game between pirate and navy, brute strength was often the weakest move. The men who thrived in this dangerous arena learned that survival and victory were earned in moments no sailor saw coming. The waves hid more than hulls. They concealed intent, calculation, and the quiet grinding of wills. You may think a ship's strength lay in its wood and guns, but out here, the true battlefield was the mind. It began long before the first shot was fired. Pirates understood that the Navy's discipline, while impressive, could be its own prison. Bound by rigid orders, war captains often failed to see the small, shifting details that pirates thrived upon. They would wait for the perfect wind, the bend in the coastline, the flicker of hesitation in a lookout's eyes, and then, like a blade drawn in silence, they would make their move. Picture a frigate's crew lulled by a slow dawn, only to spot, too late, a smaller, faster vessel cutting across their path, its black sails swelling like the chest of a predator about to strike. This wasn't recklessness, it was calculated audacity, timed to exploit every crack in the Navy's armor. Pirates were masters of invisibility long before the age of stealth. They didn't need to vanish entirely, they only needed to seem unworthy of notice. A ship might approach, disguised as a humble merchant, sails patched, crew slouching lazily on deck. You, standing on a quarterdeck, might not even give them a second glance. Yet below decks, the air would be thick with the quiet tension of men ready to spring. A dozen cutlasses already sharpened, pistols loaded, boarding hooks laid in neat rows. At the precise moment, the transformation would be instantaneous. False flags struck, black banners rising, and suddenly you'd see the trap you'd sailed straight into. Their cunning was not confined to disguise. They knew the sea's moods better than any admiral's charts. A naval captain might avoid dangerous shoals or unpredictable currents, but pirates often sought them out. In treacherous waters, the Navy's heavy ships moved like lumbering beasts, but a pirate sloop could dart between reefs, vanish into coves, or ride tides that would tear a frigate apart. They treated the ocean not as an obstacle, but as an ally, a force as mercurial and unpredictable as themselves. Imagine following such a vessel into a narrow channel at dusk, only to find yourself pinned between rocks and a rising tide, while the smaller ship slips away under cover of night. And then there was the power of fear, raw, unadorned, and carefully cultivated. Pirates understood that the Navy's strength rested partly on the morale of its crew. Break that, and you weakened the entire machine. They used their image as a weapon. Blackbeard, for example, famously tied slow-burning fuses into his beard, so when he appeared on deck, his face seemed wreathed in smoke and fire. The effect was terrifying, especially to sailors already unnerved by the chaos of battle. You don't need to face a man like that to feel his presence. Even the thought of him approaching was enough to make hands tremble on the rigging. A single, well-crafted reputation could do more damage to an enemy crew than a broadside of cannon fire. Yet their cunning extended beyond the open sea. Pirates knew the value of silence, not the absence of sound, but the deliberate withholding of information. They would vanish for weeks, allowing rumors to ferment. By the time they reappeared, the Navy might have shifted resources, chasing shadows in the wrong waters. This manipulation of uncertainty was a game of patience. Imagine the frustration of an admiral receiving conflicting reports. A pirate ship spotted near Barbados one week, then off the coast of Africa the next. Every wrong move stretched the Navy thinner, every delay giving the pirates space to plan their next strike. You might think this constant maneuvering took a toll on the pirates themselves, and it did. But their survival depended on maintaining strength in both body and mind. While the Navy's rations rotted in barrels or spoiled in tropical heat, pirates adapted. They sought fresh water on hidden islands, foraged for food in coves no map recorded, and traded quietly with sympathetic merchants under false names. The result was a crew, lean, alert, and often healthier than the men sent to hunt them. This health was no accident. It was another advantage, another layer of readiness when the time came to fight or flee. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of their tactics was their unpredictability. A naval captain could prepare for battle, blockade, or chase. But how do you prepare for an enemy who refuses to follow the rules? Pirates might attack at dawn one week, then vanish into a storm the next, or even assist a stranded Navy ship only to rob it later under more favorable conditions. Every encounter was a puzzle with missing pieces, forcing their enemies to second-guess every decision. And in the hesitation that followed, the pirates found their edge. It wasn't brute force that kept them alive. It was the dance of perception and deception, the understanding that to outfight the Navy, you first had to outthink it. You begin to see why so many Navy captains, for all their might, treated the pirate threat with a wary respect. On the ocean's chessboard, the pirates were not merely pieces, they were the players.
When the Navy finally managed to corner a pirate crew, it often discovered that the trap was mutual. Pirates understood the art of staging a confrontation, making it seem like they had no choice but to fight head-on, when in reality, every inch of the field had been shaped to their advantage. A broadside in open water could be deadly, but a broadside in a narrow inlet with echoing cliffs that amplified the roar and smoke was something else entirely. The sensory overload, thunder in the ears, a wall of smoke swallowing the view, could shake even a veteran gunner's aim. While the Navy scrambled to regain control, the pirates, already anticipating the chaos, would slip into positions that allowed them to fire again before the enemy even reloaded. It was in these moments of staged inevitability that pirates displayed a knack for turning the Navy's pride against itself. The officers' training demanded they press the attack, to show resolve in the face of defiance. Pirates counted on it. They'd bait warships into pursuing at full sail, knowing the wind would shift suddenly near certain islands or shoals. When the Navy found itself overshooting the engagement zone, pirates could cut across their wake, delivering crippling fire into the warship's exposed stern. A Navy captain might call it bad fortune, but the pirates knew it was nothing less than theater. Every beat of the drama rehearsed in their minds long before the first shot. And then there was the matter of boarding, an act the Navy considered brutish and chaotic, but which pirates turned into a precise, almost ritualized strike. They didn't simply swarm, they struck at the moments when the enemy's defenses were psychologically weakest, when smoke blinded the deck, when an officer had just been felled, when the cry of "Fire in the hold" rang out and every man's mind leapt to the powder magazine below. In such moments, even disciplined sailors lost formation, and the pirates' advance became an unstoppable tide. If you were among the Navy crew, you would hear the boots hitting your deck before you could even draw your blade, and in that heartbeat, the fight was already over. The pirates' cunning didn't stop at the enemy's hull. They carried their strategies ashore, weaving themselves into the politics and trade of coastal towns. They cultivated informants, dock workers, innkeepers, shipwrights, who could tell them when a Navy ship was short on powder or when its captain had been ordered to sail without his fastest tender. With this knowledge, a pirate could choose to strike when the enemy was not just unprepared, but unsuspecting. A single whispered detail from a tavern could be worth more than a hold full of gold. Some of their most daring maneuvers involved using other ships as shields. In busy harbors or crowded trade lanes, a pirate sloop might shadow a merchant convoy, blending into its loose formation. From a distance, the Navy would see nothing more than a cluster of slow-moving traders. By the time the pirates peeled away, cutting directly across the Navy's bow, it was too late to adjust course without losing precious speed. This tactic turned the sea's traffic into a moving camouflage, one that could be adapted anywhere commerce flowed. Even the pirate flag itself, so often romanticized, was a calculated weapon. The Jolly Roger was not flown for bravado alone. Its appearance in the right moment could end a fight before it began. Merchant crews often surrendered at the sight, preferring to give up their cargo rather than risk a battle they knew they couldn't win. But to the Navy, the flag's sudden rise was more than a symbol. It was a declaration that the rules of engagement had just changed. The flag told them that the opponent was not bound by honor codes or trees, that the fight ahead would not follow the neat lines of their training. That uncertainty bred hesitation, and hesitation was a crack wide enough for pirates to drive an entire ship through. Their cunning often hinged on misdirection so small it was almost invisible. A pirate might send a single skiff drifting past a Navy blockade at night, its lantern swinging faintly in the dark. The Navy would turn to pursue, thinking they'd caught a straggler, only to find the main pirate vessel slipping away in the opposite direction. This use of decoys, drawn from the hunting tactics of predators on land, was particularly effective against captains eager for quick captures. The moment the Navy committed to chasing the wrong target, the true prize was already out of reach. Even in victory, pirates rarely lingered to bask in their triumph. The longer they stayed in one place, the more predictable they became, and predictability was the death of every pirate crew that grew too comfortable. After an engagement, they would scatter, sometimes sailing in entirely different directions, only to regroup weeks later in a prearranged cove. This fluidity meant the Navy could never pin them down for long. You might think you'd cornered them in one stretch of ocean, only to discover they'd been resupplying hundreds of miles away, preparing for a strike you could neither see nor stop. And so the Navy found itself in a constant state of reaction, never quite able to wrest the initiative from its elusive foe. Every chase, every skirmish, every rumor in the taverns became another move in a sprawling game where the pirates always seemed to be one step ahead. In that endless pursuit, the boundaries between hunter and hunted blurred, and the only certainty was that the next encounter would be nothing like the last.
Sometimes the most devastating moves were made without a single cannon firing. Pirates knew that a Navy ship's greatest vulnerability was not its hull, but its crew's endurance. Storms, long voyages, and supply shortages could grind even the most disciplined sailors into weary automatons. Pirates exploited this by striking after long spells of bad weather, when the Navy's sails were still damp and heavy, the ropes swollen, and the men's muscles aching from days of constant labor. In that moment, the pirates' attack felt less like a battle and more like an ambush by the sea itself. The shock of facing a fresh, well-fed crew while your own bones still ached from the storm could shatter the will to fight before swords even crossed. They also understood the art of feigned retreat. A pirate captain might deliberately allow his ship to take on superficial damage, splintered railings, torn sails, while pulling away from a Navy warship. To the pursuing captain, this was the scent of victory, the belief that the enemy was flagging. But then, without warning, the pirates would turn hard about, charging straight into the Navy's bow with guns blazing. The sudden shift from hunted to hunter rattled even experienced officers, forcing them to make snap decisions under the worst possible conditions. That calculated whiplash in momentum was often enough to tip the fight before it truly began. Close combat, when it came, was rarely left to chance. Pirates planned their boarding as if it were a stage performance, every movement timed to the second, every distraction placed with intent. A well-thrown grenade into the galley might drive the enemy crew topside, where they would find themselves flanked before they understood what was happening. Even the clatter of boots on a deck above could serve as a psychological tool, making it seem as though more attackers had boarded than truly had. You, standing in that chaos, might swing wildly at shadows, certain you were outnumbered, when in reality you were simply outmaneuvered. On certain occasions, pirates inverted the very idea of an ambush. Instead of hiding, they would present themselves openly, anchored in a tempting position, cargo seemingly exposed, while the true danger lay beneath the waves. Divers, skilled in working with weighted lines, could attach charges or cut anchor cables from below, sowing havoc before the Navy realized the trap. By the time the warship's crew understood that the attack was coming from under the surface, the pirates were already boarding, their advantage multiplied by the confusion. Their mastery of timing was matched by a mastery of noise and silence. At night, they could move in eerie quiet, sails reefed to catch only the gentlest breezes, hulls slipping through black water without a splash. Navy crews, straining their eyes in the dark, might hear nothing until the creak of a boarding plank or the snap of a pistol hammer signaled it was already too late. Yet in daylight, pirates could be deafening, filling the air with drum beats, shouted curses, and cannon blasts, not to overwhelm with force, but to make the enemy's orders inaudible, turning disciplined ranks into a confused melee. Every tactic was grounded in the same philosophy: to make the enemy fight on terms that were no longer theirs. If the Navy was built for open water engagements, the pirates would vanish into reefs and shoals. If the Navy favored formal lines of battle, the pirates would attack from oblique angles, breaking formation before the first exchange. If the Navy prided itself on discipline, the pirates would find ways to shatter it, through fear, chaos, or the simple erosion of patience. This constant forcing of the enemy into alien conditions was the essence of pirate survival. Even their retreats were laced with purpose. Pirates didn't merely flee, they left behind problems: fires on captured ships that drifted toward blockading warships, decoy boats loaded with weighted barrels to mimic treasure holds, false trails of debris leading into dangerous waters. The Navy could not ignore these signs, and in chasing them, they often bled away the very time and resources needed to resume the hunt. By the time they realized the ruse, the pirates were gone, and the cycle began anew. For the Navy, these constant losses of initiative were more than frustrating, they were corrosive. Morale thinned, trust in leadership wavered, and the specter of pirate cunning became a ghost that haunted even successful missions. Captains began to second-guess every decision, fearing that the wind, the tide, and even the emptiness of the horizon might be part of a trap. That was the pirates' final and most enduring victory: the transformation of the sea itself into an extension of their will. By the end of any campaign against them, the question was no longer, can we catch them, but what will they make us do next? And once a captain began thinking that way, once he surrendered the mental battlefield, the pirates had already won, whether or not a single shot had been fired.
Some of the boldest plays were executed not in the wild expanse of the open ocean, but in the very shadow of the Navy's own harbors. Pirates knew the psychology of proximity, that the closer they struck to the enemy's home, the deeper the humiliation. Under cover of darkness, they would drift into anchorages where Navy ships lay moored, trusting in the complacency of sailors who believed themselves safe. A sudden cut to a mooring line, a swift tow into a tidal current, and a warship could be set adrift, helpless until daylight revealed the loss. No broadside, no bloody deck, just the stinging knowledge that their fortress had been breached without a single alarm raised.
They turned the environment into a partner, particularly in shallow coastal waters where tides could betray the unwary. Pirates memorized tidal tables not as dry numbers, but as living rhythms. They knew when sandbars would be exposed enough to block a pursuing frigate, and when the incoming tide would carry them effortlessly out to sea. A Navy captain might see open water ahead, unaware that within the hour, shifting sands would turn his path into a dead end. By the time the tide freed his ship, the pirates would be half a day's sail away, their wake already dissolving into the morning light. Speed alone wasn't their greatest asset. It was controlled speed. Pirates often adjusted their pace deliberately, knowing that moving too quickly could cause a Navy ship to burn precious powder and shot in a hasty chase. Instead, they would keep just close enough to tempt pursuit, forcing the Navy to maintain a pace that strained both crew and rigging. Hours later, when the warship was tired, its sails worn from constant adjustment, the pirates would surge forward, disappearing beyond the range of even the best guns. You, as the hunter, would be left with the hollow sensation of having been played like a fish on a line. Their cunning extended into the minds of their enemies long before any confrontation. Rumors were a weapon as sharp as any cutlass. Pirates planted tales of phantom fleets, ships that moved without wind, ghost crews immune to bullets, until these myths wove themselves into sailors' imaginations. When the real pirates appeared, the enemy's mind was already half defeated, expecting the supernatural. The human brain, primed for fear, often saw more than was there, mistaking shadows for sails or distant thunder for cannon fire. That tension frayed discipline long before the first shot. And when pirates did choose to fight openly, they often attacked the symbols of power rather than the strongest point of defense. A Navy captain's flag, the officer's quarters, the primary helm, these became immediate targets. Striking them was more than a physical blow. It was an attack on the psychological heart of command. When the flag fell, the crew's confidence wavered. When the captain was wounded or cut down, chaos rippled outward in an instant. A fight that might have lasted hours could collapse into surrender within minutes, all because the pirates knew precisely where to sink their teeth. Their skill in manipulating perception was almost theatrical. They could make a small crew seem vast, pounding drums, firing muskets from multiple points to suggest more men than they possessed. Conversely, they could make a large crew seem pitiful, sending only a handful of ragged figures topside until the moment of engagement. The Navy learned too late that numbers on the deck did not equal numbers in the fight, and that every empty space might be a deliberate lie. Even surrender was a move they could turn to their advantage. On rare occasions, pirates would yield deliberately, allowing themselves to be boarded, their ship captured. But while the Navy celebrated its easy prize, the pirates would use the proximity to strike from within. Powder stores sabotaged, rigging cut, officers taken hostage before the warship even cleared the harbor. In the morning, the Navy might find that its hard-won catch had slipped away entirely, leaving behind only damage and the lesson that victory was never what it seemed. The cumulative effect of these tactics was devastating to the Navy's sense of control. In a world where order and predictability were the pillars of military strength, the pirates thrived in unpredictability. Every encounter was an education in doubt. Every sighting a question with no clear answer. Was this a real chase or a feint? Would the fight come in minutes or days? Could the wind itself be trusted? In the end, the pirates' truest weapon was not their ships, their guns, or even their notorious courage. It was the slow, deliberate corrosion of their enemy's certainty. For once a Navy captain could no longer tell the difference between truth and trick, between pursuit and entrapment, the battle was already over. The sea belonged to those who could shape it into something more than water and wind, and in that art, the pirates reigned without rival.